The U.S. government's actions between 1933 and 1945 were majorly influenced by isolationism, resulting in a split decision to help the Jewish population. This caused wavering support for Jewish refugees trying to flee Europe from religious persecution. This map shows the Jewish population distribution in Europe during 1933.
This picture depicts a 1930s street scene of Jewish people in Paris, France.
This was a wedding portrait of Hilda and Gerrit Verdoner in Amsterdam, Netherlands in 1933.
This photo illustrates a Jewish family out on the town in Kalisz, Poland, 1935.
This is a photo of Berta Rosenheim on her first day of school in Leipzig, Germany in 1929. Between March 1938, when Germany conquered Austria, and October 1941, when Germany forbade immigration, more than 1,200 ships carrying around 111,000 Jewish refugees arrived in New York. The German transatlantic liner MS St. Louis, carrying 937 passengers, the majority of whom were German Jews, departed from Hamburg, Germany, to Havana, Cuba, on May 13, 1939. The passengers on board the ship discovered upon arrival in Havana that the landing certificates they had acquired were void, and the Cuban government compelled St. Louis to return to Germany. Passengers begged for help in telegrams sent to American relatives and public leaders as the ship headed towards Miami. However, the U.S. government forbade the passengers from landing, even though they said they sympathized with them, because they lacked interest permits. The ship ended up sailing back to Europe with the passengers, who ended up once again living under Nazi rule. Some ended up acquiring visas to enter the United States, but over 200 of those passengers died from their persecution.
Although Americans claimed to sympathize with the passengers of the St. Louis, coming documents from the government said otherwise. This curbing immigration document from 1940 was the Memorandum of the Conference on Curbing Immigration. They discussed ways to immediately curb the entrance of immigrants and non-immigrants into the United States, instituted by the Foreign Service of the State Department and the Immigration and Naturalization Service of the Department of Justice. What this says is that there will be new intensive screening on the person hoping to enter, a new quota of issued visas. Police coming into the USA on business no longer have to have a visa or passport. If your visitor visa expired while you were in the USA, you would have to have a court case before you obtained a real visa.
This State Department memo on halting immigration was written in 1940 and says, for non-immigrants, the State Department proposed that the department should have the authority to grant or deny entry into the United States to individuals seeking non-immigrant visas, such as temporary visitor and transit visas. This would remove the discretion on consuls and instead centralize the decision-making process. The department would be able to effectively control the immigration of people in this category and could provide private instructions to the visa division regarding nationalities that should not be admitted, as well as individuals who should be excluded. This policy would need to be applied universally and could not be implemented selectively for specific countries such as Germany or Russia, as it would invite retaliation. They want to try everything in their power to stop immigrants from entering. Any obstacle they can throw at them, they want to. One idea of theirs is to just continuously postpone people's visas for as long as they want to with no solid reason. However, they could only be temporary, so they had to come up with a different way through the law to make it absolute. Their summary includes them saying, we can effectively control non-immigrants by prohibiting the issuance of visas unless the consent of the department to obtained in advance for universal application. We can temporarily prevent the number of immigrants from certain localities such as Cuba, Mexico, and other places of origin of German intending immigrants by simply raising administrative obstacles.
Getting a visa was not an easy task for refugees. The United States continued making entering the country as hard as possible. For immigrants to be allowed into the United States, they needed an immigration visa stamped onto their passport. This was an arduous process and could take up to years. You would first have to register for a waiting list to be interviewed by the U.S. consulate. Only if they said you were a candidate could you continue with the process. If you got accepted, you would have to muster together the documents needed, such as a birth certificate, your application, a tax document, medical clearance, a police certificate, military discharge, and an inventory list. You would have to go around multiple places to obtain these, and even then some could deny you. Next, you would need to find an American sponsor, such as a family member or friend. If they accepted you, then you would have to buy a boat ticket to get there. These costed modern-day thousands of dollars. Next, you would have to pay for transit visas, including an entrance visa and a land permit. Your interview would then be conducted, checking if you had all the documents, if you were healthy, and if you would not be a threat to national security. Some interviewers tried to find a way to deny people no matter what, and sending them back months or years and thousands of dollars. If you completed all these steps, only then would you be allowed in. Even then, some would deny people at any step just because they could. After Kristallnacht in November of 1938, these polls were taken in America by the Institute of Public Opinion. On the left, the poll was asked if you disapprove of the Nazi treatment of the Jews, which many said they disapproved of. However, on the right, the question was asked, should more Jewish people be allowed into the U.S.? Many said no, even though they knew what was happening was wrong. This is evidence of isolationism. The U.S. saw the treatment of the Jews as wrong, but still wanted to stay isolated and exclude those who needed refuge because of their selfishness. Similarly, in the next poll, Americans were asked whether or not they think the United States should declare war on Germany and send their army and navy. The majority said no. There were about 112,000 Quakers in the U.S. in the 1930s. Even though they held a small percentage of the population, when confronted with Nazi persecution of the Jews, they took action. At its peak between 1920 and 1924, the AFSC provided meals for around 1 million European children daily. After some violent Jewish acts, the AFSC began work and established a refugee division to help individuals and families in need. The AFSC formed ally groups and created a network of refugee aid agencies in Europe. People trying to escape religious persecution would contact them, and then the AFSC would work to get them immigrated into the U.S. During Trump's administration, he slashed refugee admissions by more than 85%, setting record-low admission caps nearly every year. 30,000 for 2019, 18,000 for 2020, and just 15,000 for 2021. Joe Biden has worked to mediate this problem and has projected a total of refugees for 2023 to be 125,000.
I strongly believe that we hold a significant responsibility toward the immigrant and refugee populations of today. As a nation that prides itself on being the land of the free, it's difficult to reconcile why we turn away and seal our borders to those in dire need of refuge. The rigorous and complex process of becoming a citizen often leads to a sense of misplaced superiority amongst those who have obtained citizenship, rather than a sense of gratitude and empathy towards those who have not. Looking back at history, during World War II, the U.S. missed several opportunities to offer aid to Jewish refugees. Today, we see a similar situation happening on the Mexican border, where violence and crime are rampant, and yet the solution we chose is to build a wall. Instead of closing our doors, we should be opening them up to those in need, just as we would want other countries to do for us if the roles were reversed. By providing help and support to those people in need, we could restore the relationships with countries we may have tarnished and rebuild our reputation as a compassionate nation.